southern state. One wrong for one mistake, and they take the plate. PAGA notices stacking high, frivolous claims that make you ask why. Yeah, you need a shield, you need a plan, you need the facts straight from the source. We're charting a new course, of course. Fight the good fight, or the right side. It's on the California labor law Odyssey tonight.
Good evening. I'm Tom Manzo, host of the California Labor Law Odyssey. And tonight we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Bruce Wick from the Housing Contractors of California. Also sits on the board of the California Business and Industrial Alliance as an ex officio member. And welcome to the show tonight, Bruce. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So Bruce has got quite a bit of experience dealing with government agencies over the years, CalOSHA being one of them. And I know you wanted to come on the show. You wanted to voice a few thoughts. And this was what the format's really for. We want to talk about politics a little bit. We want to talk about labor laws and government agencies. You know, come on and share some experience and some thoughts and knowledge with us. So what's on your mind tonight, Bruce?
Appreciate that, Tom. Appreciate the time. I think there's a missing piece to the debate and discussion about who to vote for the California governor's office. Some people are saying, well, California is dominated by the Democratic Party in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
So a Republican governor would be ineffective. And I think that's overstated because in the legislature you have, yes, a lot of Democrats, but there are moderate Democrats, liberal Democrats, and progressive Democrats. They don't all agree on exactly the same stuff. They don't vote as a monolith. So even a Republican governor can have interaction and involvement in the development of legislation.
I mean, I would think the only thing that the governor could do would be just veto a lot of the bills that are coming up. Or can he not veto the bills?
Well, a governor's office can get involved by sending messages. And the governor's office also can tell the legislature, we have a problem here in one of our agencies, and you need to change some laws to fix this problem in our agency. Any governor can do that, and the legislature should be involved. But, again, the Democrats don't all agree on everything all the time.
Right.
So there are bills that the governor can certainly have impact on, and, to override a veto takes virtually all the Democrats all agreeing on the same thing at the same time.
Right. I mean, that's what I would look at it. The governor at least has the power to veto some crazy bill that they came up with this time. But I believe you're here to tell us, hey, the governor has a little bit more authority than that, more than I think people think.
That's the thing I'm here to talk about. Is the governor is the executive branch, leads the executive branch of the state of California. A massive set of agencies, departments, and divisions that impact every Californian's life. And that needs to be part of the debate and the discussion when people think about who I should pick for the governor's race. The leadership of the governor makes a big difference in those agencies. And I want to give a couple of examples of how much of a difference that can make. It impacts everybody in California.
So when it comes to an agency, how many agencies are there in total?
Well, Steve Hilton has a 19-page detailed summary of all the agencies that are under the California governor's auspices.
And what's the number?
The total number of all those things, I have no idea.
You don't know.
We could look it up. But what I want to talk about is just to give an example of one agency. In the governor's office, he has a cabinet, and there are 12 secretaries of agencies.
12 secretaries.
12 secretaries of overall agencies. And we're going to talk about one.
So under these agencies, there's more agencies?
Correct.
And
So-
that's why the number's so large.
That's why the numbers are so expansive. So the labor secretary reports directly to the governor, is appointed by the governor, and then has the Labor and Workforce Development Agency has some personnel around that labor secretary. And then below them is the Department of Industrial Relations. It has an executive director appointed by the governor and staff overseeing many divisions, many boards, and trust funds.
So there's two people within the Department of Industrial Relations that are appointed by the governor.
The labor secretary is appointed by the governor. The DIR director is appointed by the governor. And then all these divisions, there's the Division of Workers' Comp, Division
Okay.
of Occupational Safety and Health,
Okay.
we know as Cal OSHA. The chief of that unit is appointed by the governor.
Well, so the governor has a lot of power.
Yes, the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, also called the Labor Commissioner's Office, the Labor Commissioner, appointed by the governor, oversees that unit. Boards, executive officers, and board members are appointed. So, yes.
How many appointees do you think Newsom has appointed?
Well, they say every governor every year appoints about 3,300 different people, including
Wow.
judges and justices for positions where a judge or justice has retired. Well, a governor impacts has a wide impact.
So hold
shall
on,
we say.
back to the DIR, back to the labor commissioner and things like that. If the governor's not satisfied with that person, can the governor say, "Hey, we want this person removed. We're going to
Yes.
appoint somebody new"?
Yes.
At any time at all.
Yes.
They don't need to ask anybody. They don't need to go to the legislator. They just have the ability to say, "Hey, labor commissioner, you're fired. We're bringing in somebody new."
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow. That's
So,
quite a bit of power.
well, it is. And again, you don't want a governor to use that wrongly. But when leadership comes from the governor down through those agencies, people will be accountable and responsible. But what happens, I've been dealing with agencies and all these departments and divisions for over 25 years. My experience is the vast majority of employees are sincere, hardworking people that want to do a good job. But in any governmental agency, in any bureaucracy, an insurance company has the same issues. There are three types of people that can cause problems and havoc. One is a type of person that can't handle power well and has a little fiefdom in there, and it takes somebody reaching down to say, you either need to change your ways or we're going to move you laterally so you can't cause problems anymore. The second type is someone who thinks they're smarter than everybody else, especially when it comes to regulating an industry, and a person sitting in an office says, I can understand more. I don't have to really listen to you. I can figure out what you need sitting in my office compared to you who actually do this thing every day. And then the other part is the inertia. Someone in a position of leadership who says, that's not my job. I know something wrong or bad is happening, but I don't think it's my job to deal with it. And that's where, again, leadership comes in, because problems should go up to somebody who finally says, yeah, that's my job. And sometimes in these agencies, it has to go all the way up to the governor's office.
The unfortunate part is my experience that I've seen is it seems like the more you fail, the more you get promoted, especially in Newsom's administration.
Some people play politics well and just spend time in some agency and work their way up. And then they're in a position where they are counterproductive to the mission of that agency. So I want to give a couple of examples so people can understand
Absolutely.
how leadership would make a difference, and how it doesn't just impact businesses, it impacts employers of all types.
Sure.
And it impacts everyday citizens. So let's talk about Cal OSHA. An example in Cal OSHA. Back in the early 2000s, it was understood Cal OSHA had an outdated reg on first aid kit. Supposedly, you had to consult with a doctor, every single employer, all 1.4 million,
That sounds nuts.
to figure out what needed to be in your first aid kit. when really most employers should be able to just say, hey, buy an ANSI standard kit and I'm good. So in 2006, we had one of our occupational safety and health professionals make a petition. Cal OSHA, why don't you just change a few words? And this thing will be up to date and make sense. Well, I was in a meeting in 2011, 5 years later, in Oakland, and it's with all the stakeholders, labor representatives, management representatives, and we're wondering why it's taken 5 years to do something this simple. And the Cal OSHA senior safety engineer leading it was kind of all over the place, and finally somebody just straight out asked him, "Why are you acting this way?" And he said, "You mean high-handed, arbitrary, and dictatorial?" I said, "Because I can." We didn't finalize anything that day.
Big surprise. When did it get finalized?
It has not yet.
In what year did this start?
2006. We are hopeful.
Do employers still need to get a doctor to sign off on the first aid kit?
According to the Cal OSHA regulations, yes.
Oh my God.
20 years, and we might get it finalized this year. One person that was exerting power and authority he couldn't handle
Talk about bureaucracy.
derailed it. But then
Unbelievable.
nobody said, wow, we need to fix that fast because we look bad. And Cal OSHA will say, as many other agencies have said, well, we're under-resourced. And it's been surprising to me how few people know or understand how agencies are funded. The Schwarzenegger administration approached the employer community, and employers are all employers, social nonprofits, colleges and universities, governmental agencies, and businesses. In 2009, they approached employers and said, we're just doing all these smoke and mirror budgets, all these Cal OSHA and the Labor Commissioner's office, we can't plan our budgeting very well. Would you add a surcharge, say 1%, to all of your workers' compensation payments, send it to us to fund most all of DIR, and that'll give us stability and funding? And we said, okay, but we want transparency, we want clear accounting, and we want to know what your priorities are. Because both labor and management want agencies to be effective.
Right.
We need them to be effective in what they do. And they said yes. Well, of course, we had a new governor and elected in 2010. We have never received transparency. We've never received accounting.
How much did they get in 2010? How much did employers pay?
$489 million.
And what about do you have last year's stats?
Yeah. Just over $2 billion.
$2 billion. So employers have funded where did the $2 billion go?
That's a good question. So let's talk about the state auditor. The state auditor audited Cal OSHA in 2025 and said, you're 35% understaffed, but you're funded for 100% staffing. Where's this money? And we do have to give an understanding that hiring for state agencies is really problematic.
Well, I could, let me just share something with you and the viewers. I have a lot of experience as well dealing with OSHA over the years, manufacturing. And, I've dealt with various inspectors, and they come, out and hey, maybe there was an injury. They want to see what's going on. They want to tell you, hey, these are the things you need to do and correct. And I've always had good experiences with them. Very, very good experiences. And one time we went to the office, the local office in Van Nuys, California. And I have to tell you, Bruce, when I walked in there, it was a total dump. I mean, the furniture looked like it was from 1960. The computers looked like it was from 1960. I mean, who would want to work there? And I think now that I'm hearing they've got all of this money, it's shocking to me.
Well, the state auditor said, we think Cal OSHA is sitting on $202 million, but it's often these 7 different funds that are really hard to find.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, we recently had interactions with the Riverside County
Mhm.
OSHA, and they had one inspector. That was it.
Mhm.
One inspector. I mean, it's hard to believe. So they have all of this money, but I think they're having a hard time hiring people because I don't think anybody wants to work there.
Well, and plus, it's a very long and tedious process to hire someone for a state agency. And understand part of that is legitimate. If you're going to hire someone as a state enforcement personnel, you have to vet them well. But our process takes way too long. And our salary is really competitive for the kind of work you're asking, an environment you're asking them to be in. And that's where 15 years ago, the governor and these agencies should have gone to the legislature and say, help us streamline our process, make sure we're competitive so that we don't wind up understaffed. Now, Cal OSHA, $202 million. The Labor Commissioner's Office was audited in 2024. They were 70% understaffed for all their regular claims.
And still fully funded?
Still fully
70%.
funded. And the funding would have covered all PAGA claims for the Labor Commissioner's Office to investigate. And the initial response to the state auditor when they said, why are you so understaffed? They said, well, or I'm sorry, why do you have such a backlog of processing claims? And they said, well, legislature, you give us a lot of complicated laws. We have a hard time.
No kidding.
Doing an
1,100-page
investigation.
labor law digest. They do have the most complicated laws in not only the United States, in the nation, in the world.
That part's true, but what does it have to do with you being 70 or more % understaffed when you're funded? Where has that money
Where's
gone?
the money gone?
Where has the money gone?
Yeah,
We believe in DIR there's at least $500 million
that's a lot of money.
sitting in some funds, maybe more. So why are they asking us for $2 billion this year? Why wouldn't they say, hey, we have 500 million in the bank. Let's just send us
So
1.5 billion.
you would say, let's talk right now about the DIR. Let's talk about Cal OSHA. Let's just stick with these two here. Would you say the leadership's just horrendous now at this point there?
Those leaders, I believe, are sincere people who fall under the it's not my job.
That's terrible.
It takes leadership. And that's where some people, I think, are unfair to Steve Hilton. Because Steve talks very directly about some of these things, but he's very clear, he's very specific. And that's what it takes. You have to go into an agency and find the culprit, someone who's being counterproductive, and say, you have to change, or we're going to promote you somewhere, we're going to promote you laterally into a place you can't.
What about just
harm.
terminating some?
That's hard. You don't need to terminate people. You don't need to dismantle the agency. You just send that person off to some other position where they can't be counterproductive to the agency's mission. So let's talk about another issue involving Cal OSHA that will give you an even clearer example of why leadership is so important. Residential fall protection. Back in the early 2001, to be exact, Cal OSHA realized our fall protection regulations for residential construction, especially as it relates to framing contractors, was really outdated and outmoded, and we wanted to update it. And so we did something pretty novel, but that was really pretty cool. We, for 2 years, had a series of meetings where carpenters' union representatives, framing contractors' representatives, including myself, and some Cal OSHA good people sat around a table and we said, you know what, let's not let somebody in an office write this regulation. Let's write a brand new regulation. Let's start with what's the safest way to protect carpenters building new housing from the ground up. And we did, and it's a beautiful reg. Everybody understood it. Training for it was clear and clean because everybody said, well, yeah, that's the safest way to do things. But FedOSHA, when we made that law effective, said, oh, we don't like it because it's different than ours. And we said, sorry, you don't like it. Meet with us. come out here and have a meeting with us. We'll come there, sit around a table with us, and let us tell you why the carpenters union people, why the carpenters themselves and the framing contractors say this regulation is better than your federal OSHA regulation. They only met with us one time. And the guy sat down and said, "We're right, you're wrong. I have a plane to catch." Walked
Wow.
out the door. We have said all this time. So for 20 years, we had this on-running battle, and we had the principal engineer of the Cal OSHA Standards Board stood up for us. One of those people who said, "It's my job to protect California carpenters, and I'm going to do my best, even though it means I exchange a series of unfriendly letters with Fed OSHA back and forth over time." And but then he retired in 2022. Within 2 months, his replacement came up, proposed a new regulation that made federal OSHA happy. And we said, "Wait, that's bad for our carpenter." We had always told
Right.
Cal OSHA leadership all these years would say, "You got to get Fed OSHA off our backs." We would say, "We're doing the right thing here. We're standing up for our California carpenters. So tell federal OSHA if they don't like it, come out and meet with us, or we'll come there. Let's meet with them."
So the newest person at Cal OSHA, we're not a fan of. Is that what we're saying?
Well, that person thankfully just retired. But again, nobody in Cal OSHA, once this one principal engineer stood up for us, our carpenters, and then retired, nobody, Cal OSHA, nobody in DIR, nobody at labor agency said, we need to challenge federal OSHA on what they're doing. So July 1 of last year, 2025, we had to submit Fed OSHA's regulations. And our California carpenters are in a less safe environment than they were before.
That's terrible. That's not a good thing.
And you know what's even worse than that? The cost to comply with that regulation adds every year to the cost of new housing in California $132 million.
Yeah, which is too much to begin with.
Unaffordable housing, we added
Just got more unaffordable.
$32 million
Just got more
for a
unaffordable.
regulation that's less safe for our carpenters. How wrong is that? Nobody, Cal OSHA, DIR, or labor agency will stand up.
Bruce, let's take a break. When we come back, let's get back into another agency and let's talk about what the governor can and cannot do when it comes to these agencies.
Right. Good idea.
The California Business and Industrial Alliance, CABIA, ran a full-page ad in the California Post, slamming the California Chamber of Commerce's misguided endorsement of Xavier Becerra for governor. Becerra has a record of defending the Private Attorneys General Act, PAGA, one of California's most damaging, abuse-ridden labor laws. Unsurprisingly, he was also endorsed by big labor, including the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, and United Food and Commercial Workers International Union, UFCW. When asked which policies he would change as governor, Becerra named none. The Cal Chamber's endorsement of Xavier Becerra is a betrayal of the very businesses it claims to represent. Our state's job creators need an advocate with a backbone, not one that will bend to the will of big labor and its self-serving agenda. That's why CABIA is proud to be fighting for businesses and against the union-backed policies that make operating in California almost impossible. If you are not already a member, join CABIA today. Go to cabia.org for more.
Welcome back to the show. So Bruce, let's pick up where you left off. You had one more point you wanted to discuss on Cal OSHA.
Residential fall protection. And it's a corollary to it, but it's an important additional point about the impact a governor and leadership can have. It's a requirement of every regulatory agency, because most are governed by boards, volunteer people from California who a governor appoints. And the Cal OSHA Standards Board is a good example of that. 7 people, some representing labor, some management, some occupational safety and health expertise. And the governor appoints them to staggering terms. They're volunteers. They all have full-time jobs. So it's a requirement that every regulatory agency outline the impact financially of any new regulation to California. And there's an extra part of the law that says if a regulation is going to cost $50 million or more annually, there has to be a really detailed financial analysis. And it makes sense because you want a board member, and again, Cal OSHA Standards Board, these are people that give 1 or 2 days a month volunteering to this board. And
But again, they're appointed by the governor.
appointed by the governor, and they have full-time jobs. So they show up, they're trying to sort through all the different regulatory issues. It makes sense that the agency should say, if you say yes to this regulation, you are adding this cost of this regulation into the California environment. Whoever pays for it, sometimes it's consumers, sometimes it's employers, etc. And with residential fall protection, it was going to be more than 50 million. So Cal OSHA hired a economist, and he was a qualified economist. He called me and said, Cal OSHA gave me your number, and I think you know something about this because I don't really know anything about construction. He's going to do a detailed financial analysis of an industry he knows nothing about. So I spent months talking with him. Others did. Time on the phone, trying to get him up to speed. He didn't send us a draft of his final thing and just sent it out. And he said, this regulation is going to cost $87 million a year. But the fall injuries it will prevent are worth $86 million in savings. So ultimately it only costs $800,000 a year. I immediately put a letter together showing all of his mistakes, all of his miscalculations, saying, no, it costs $132 million a year.
And what happened with that?
I'm not done.
We want to hear.
It costs $132 million a year.
Yeah.
And by the way, you did not say if there are some fall injuries minimized, you will add significantly to pneumatic nail gun injuries, ladder injuries, cumulative trauma injuries, which will far outweigh any potential fall injuries. So it's $132 million plus. It'll cost more in injuries. I sent that letter off within a week of him publishing that. And so you asked what the response is?
We're waiting.
0.
That's too bad.
No one ever responded. So Cal OSHA's leadership has said, we complied with the law. We employed an economist to tell us how much this regulation would cost, and we presented that information to our board members when they voted for it. You and I would say it's inherent that that information be accurate. And it wasn't. And Cal OSHA leadership said, this is part of that inertia. It's not my job to make it accurate. It was my job to get somebody to publish it. And they did.
Well, so now during break, we talked about another agency that you wanted to bring up. Let's
It's not an agency, it's a trust fund.
a trust fund.
Yes. DIR oversees several trust funds.
Okay, this is news to me.
And actually,
Who's in charge of the trust fund?
DIR oversights it, and there are employees, usually attorneys and staffers, who administer that trust fund. Take claims against it, find out if they're legitimate, and then pay the claims.
Do they have a board or anything like that?
No.
So the trust fund works under the Department of Industrial Relations.
DIR, correct.
Okay.
And California actually came up with a very good law right after World War II. We said we're not going to rely just on the federal government to take care of our wounded veterans that come back to California.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to establish a fund so that if one of our service members was wounded in action and comes back and wants to compete in the marketplace for employment, that their employer will not be tagged under workers' compensation, because workers' compensation is a no-fault claim,
Right.
for injuries, for a subsequent injury related to that war injury.
Got it.
Makes sense. Everybody says, yeah, we want to take care of our veterans, especially our wounded veterans. We want to give them every advantage to be fairly taken care of in the workplace. And so for 60 or so years, that worked really well. And in 2010, when employers took over funding that Subsequent Injuries Benefits Trust Fund, otherwise known as SIBTF, we funded $29 million in benefits into that fund. And we'd all say that's money well spent. We send our soldiers off to war, they get wounded, they come back, we want to take care of them, whatever they need to get back to as close as when we sent them out. Shortly after 2010, some plaintiff attorneys in workers' comp got together and said, the verbiage, and there's some case law, we think that SIBTF might be susceptible to claims by non-wounded veterans. Regular employees who had an injury and then a subsequent injury later. Now think about that. A plaintiff attorney says, it isn't illegal for me to present a claim against the SIBTF on behalf of a non-veteran. So I'm going to set the morality aside of doing that and the ethics aside. I'm just going to do it.
Well, that's the problem we have in the state of California.
We
have too many crooked lawyers, trial lawyers, billboard lawyers going after anybody and everybody. They don't care. They're the only ones, making the money. Everybody talks about, redistribution of wealth. Redistribution of wealth, in my opinion, right now, is going to the trial attorneys.
Well, plaintiff attorneys, this isn't every plaintiff attorney, but some said we're going to start exploiting this fund, this trust fund. By 2017, the payments employers were putting into that fund had gone from 26 million to 101 million. Now, you and I would say, and in the governor's office or somebody should have said, this is a problem. But again, inertia, it's not my responsibility to do something about it. In 2024, I was at a workers' comp conference that was made up primarily of claims adjusters and workers' comp defense attorneys, getting their continuing ed credit and so forth. And there was a panel and a plaintiff attorney stood up and he said, you defense attorneys in workers' comp, you're doing your client a disservice if you don't explore the issue of putting claims to the SIBTF. And here's how you do it. You work with me, plaintiff lawyer. We will minimize the claim cost to your client, the employer, but you're going to help me prepare and be able to present that claim to the SIBTF so that they won't be able to deny it. And then he said, and don't worry, the state pays for it. I stood up. I said, that's not true. Employers have to pay for that fund. And without batting an eye, he said, oh yeah, 1.35% of their workers' comp goes into that fund. He knew exactly.
Yeah.
And he lied.
Which doesn't surprise me.
This year, employers are paying into that fund $859 million.
Wow, that's a huge problem. Sounds like a Leering Center problem. Is that what that was in Minnesota? Is it the Work Comp Leering Center?
So, believe it or not, last week, Governor Newsom signed a bill. Legislature finally passed a bill that's going to address SIBTF and hopefully greatly minimize these claims. But in the meantime, that should have been done in when? 2016?
And why did it have to go that far? Why do we have to watch it go from 80 to 800?
And how much has been paid in this last 10 or 11 years?
Right.
$3 billion.
Wow.
Employers, social nonprofits, colleges and universities, businesses are all out collectively. $3 billion that went off into exploiting that fund that we could all use to pay raises and bonuses and equipment and things like that. And we're not done because there are 30,000 open claims in front of SIBTF. They're going to have to work.
That's a big number.
So what will the ultimate number be? We don't know yet. But that's a total example of nobody was blowing the whistle in all these opportunities, and the governor's office said,
Just too
"Not
much
my
fraud.
problem.
California is
It's not-
rampant with fraud.
It's not my problem." That's the problem we have. So, let's talk about your favorite subject, PAGA. And your watchers of Labor Law Odyssey know all about it. So we'll just quickly state, it's supposed to be a temporary thing. 2004, Gray Davis, the last bill he signed, because as we said, there was unstable funding for the Labor Commissioner's office to investigate labor law claims. Okay, we'll temporarily allow private attorneys to bring those claims on behalf of the state because the state doesn't have enough enforcement officers. 75% of the penalties will go back to the Labor Commissioner to fund employees and cover that. And then by hopefully maybe 2010, we'll end private attorneys bringing those claims. As we know, in 2010, employers started fully funding Labor Commissioners, so it wasn't an issue. The legislature should have ended PAGA in 2010. It still is going today. And again, these are plaintiff attorneys in labor law.
Billion-dollar cottage industry. Billions of dollars. You can go to the website, cabia.org. You can look at the data. It's unbelievable the amount of money employers are spending every year to settle these cases. It's unbelievable how much the attorneys are receiving. It was close to $900 million last year in attorney fees.
In attorney's fees. And that's not the defense attorney fees who are fighting on the back end.
Not at all.
It's
Yes.
the plaintiff attorneys who get that. And again, this is part of PAGA. Not all, but some of these plaintiff labor attorneys, they will bring a PAGA claim against social nonprofits,
Universities,
universities. But think
religious institutions.
Think about social nonprofits. You and I have talked with some of them.
Children's hospitals.
Yep. They can't go to their funders and say, "Will you send us some more money?"
Absolutely not.
Because we're being investigated for labor law violations by the state of California. They say that doesn't work. They don't have other funding sources. Clearly, a social nonprofit is not in any way intending to cheat their employees out of wages. Clearly. But the state allows those claims to go through. And you and I, we've talked with social nonprofits, and they say the only thing I can do is cut back services
Right.
to the most needy people in our communities.
Salvation Army.
Salvation
Army's been hit so many times, and they're trying to, rehabilitate people that have been on drugs. All the things that Salvation Army does good, these attorneys have zero shame, and will go after and sue organizations like that.
Yes, and this is one of the clear, specific examples about Steve Hilton. I know Steve has spent significant time with you and with attorney Rich Fry, one of the major experts on PAGA in California. Steve he wants to know and understand and knows, and he is clearly committed to, as soon as he takes office, ending new PAGA claims and minimizing old PAGA claims, because he knows it's exploiting every person in California. Because as you have talked about, if you have a business, or even we know,
if you have an employee, you could have one employee.
Well, many businesses have had to take out loans to pay their PAGA. So what happens to the businesses? The attorneys made money, the state made money, employees get very little, but all the money for raises, bonuses, new equipment, all that money has gone to the PAGA claim, and the employer says, I can't do any employee-friendly things anymore, like flex time, because if I miss by a little bit, the penalties are overwhelming.
Terrified
the liability
of bonuses
is too great.
Yeah.
So the employees are left with, wow, you just devastated my company and took away all the things that are really helpful, as flex time and things. And for what? So this is an example. Steve Hilton, I know, because he spent time with you, he knows exactly what to do about PAGA.
And we're
He'll do it
huge supporters of Steve.
day one, and then just think about this magnitude that we've talked about: SIBTF, other trust funds, Cal OSHA, Labor Commissioner's Office. And again, we've been talking about part of one of the 12 agencies. Multiply what we've been talking about by 12 times plus,
which is incredible. I had no idea.
and that is the impact the next governor can have on California for good, or keep the status quo, or allow these agencies to continue to cause problems for all Californians. So clearly, I'm voting for Steve Hilton, but I would encourage everyone to consider that all Californians, it's clear, will be better off if Steve Hilton is our governor in 2020.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great endorsement coming from you. And I need to tell the viewers, I need to tell everybody, our organization, we try to represent business. We try to say, hey, it's not a Democrat or a Republican thing, a Libertarian Party or, Democratic Socialist of America, doesn't matter what you are. PAGA, labor laws, some of these agencies, they affect everybody, because just because you're a business owner doesn't mean, hey, you're immediately a Republican. It's not true. I know enough business owners and businesses to know that's not the truth. The issue is, who are we going to choose to really help us and move forward? And it's not Javier Becerra. He's been a total failure. He's the typical institutional guy who's gotten nothing done and has failed miserably at everything he's done. Why would we choose that person? Just because I'm a Democrat doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to pick Javier Becerra. You have to vote with who do you think is really going to do the best job in that position. And I agree. And now that I've learned something today, it seems like Steve could come in and get more done than even I thought he could accomplish.
It's enormous. It's enormous, the impact a governor with leadership can have on California. And again, I appreciate Steve's studies. It's thoughtful, and he doesn't tell you anything he can't do. He's not blowing smoke. He's saying, I can do these things because he studied it and he knows how to make an impact. And all the things we've talked about today are clearly should have been dealt with long ago.
Absolutely.
And nobody took responsibility for doing it.
Absolutely. Bruce, this has been great. How about this? Final thought, 1 minute. What do you got?
1 minute. It's not that hard. Look at what Steve's website has to say. Look at Sarah's website. And then listen to both of them talk. Steve is very clear, very specific. His opponent, not nearly as much. And that's what we're going to get in effect based on who becomes the next governor.
Awesome. Well, Bruce, thanks for being part of the show today. All of our viewers out there, thank you for being part of the show. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time.